Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about Ryan Day and if he should leave Ohio State regardless of the results of the next two games. Should he just walk out the door and say, I'm done with this. I'm going to move on to the NFL, get a coordinating job, and live out the rest of his days away from Ohio State. I hope that does not happen. Really like Ryan Day, would love for him to be in the sport, but definitely something that we're going to be on the lookout for, especially if they lose tonight. It is something that a lot of people will be talking about. But let's get into some Cotton Bowl questions because there's a whole lot of them. There's a lot of different things that we haven't quite touched on the way that I want to as we go into this game, so figured I'd take the chance here and definitely give you guys an idea of a couple of different things I'm watching for tonight. And one of the biggest questions has been the question that Oregon and Tennessee were asking going in. Is there any stopping this Ohio State team? Is there any stopping what they are doing right now? Because the reality is, it looks like there isn't. It is an absolute nightmare to deal with this team right about now. And I think when you look at Ohio State, there's so many things that they do so well that if you're a defense, you can't just key in on the pass. You can't just key in on the run. You can't just hope that Will Howard's going to give you one. He hasn't given anyone one. He's been incredible in these last two games. And to give you an idea of how insane it's actually been, Oregon and Tennessee both ranked top 15 in yards allowed per game, both under 300 yards per game allowed. Ohio State went for 473 against Tennessee, 500 against Oregon. Just ridiculous efficiency from this offense. And Texas, third in the country in yards allowed per game, so a tick above those other two, but will that be enough? I don't think any of us really know if anything will really be enough to stop Jeremiah Smith, to stop Emeka Egbuka, to stop what Will Howard's doing, throwing the ball around the football field. So overall, it's one of those teams, man. It's one of those teams where you know that if you go into a game with them and they play their A-plus football, you're probably not going to come out on the right side of it. Even a Texas team that has one of the best defenses in the country, maybe only second to the team they're playing on the other side tonight. But overall, Texas does have a shot here. There is a world where Texas is able to put together a performance, and that offense really starts to click. Quinn Ewers starts to put things together, and things go very smoothly. But the bigger part of that is if Ohio State plays A-plus football, it's going to be remarkably hard for this Texas offense to keep up, just plain and simple. If this Texas defense can play a little bit better football against this Ohio State offense, maybe you can knock them down to a B+, a B-, and keep yourself in this game long enough to where maybe it's just a couple of plays down the stretch of this game. So overall, I think if they're playing A-plus football, it's going to be darn hard to stop this team. I'll put it that way. But I do think there is a moment where maybe Texas can make that one big play. Maybe Ohio State gets a little bit more nervous than they have been in the first couple of games, and then maybe things can spiral from there. But the reality is, if they play with that efficiency level at that level and Will Howard is throwing at that level, call it. That's your national championship, and we'll move on forward. But this is going to be the toughest challenge they've had pretty much all season, and we'll see if Texas can do any stopping of Ohio State. On the other side of this, if Texas clicks, what could they do? What could they do to possibly match what Ohio State has? Because you're looking around all of the teams in the country, and there are a lot of teams that could possibly match them when you talk about offensive efficiency. You know, Oregon has the ability to do that at different moments. I guess Miami would have the ability to do that, but I think their defense would give up 100 points against this Ohio State team. But overall, you look at what this Texas team can do. They lead the country in 40-plus yard plays. They lead the country in 20-plus yard plays. They can be explosive, and they can be a team that, if it all clicks, if it gets together and Quinn Ewers isn't making some of those boneheaded mistakes, Matthew Golden and Isaiah Bond are making plays after the catch, I think you have an opening here. I don't necessarily think you're going to score 45 points on this defense or do anything crazy, but at the very least, you have an ability to keep this defense on the field and make life really tough for them and get them out into open field with one-on-one coverage, and then maybe you make a couple of guys miss. The reality of this Texas offense is maybe it won't look pretty all the way throughout this night, but they can hit those big plays. They can hit those game-changing plays, those one-play games where, I mean, we saw it against Arizona State. The first touchdown was a two-play drive where they threw for 60 yards and then a 32-yard touchdown. That is what they're capable of. They absolutely have that in their bag. So they're down 7 late in this game. They still have that explosivity factor. They still have all of that. So maybe it isn't that they have to outright click. Maybe it isn't that Quinn Ewers has to complete 80% of his passes and throw for 300 yards and 4 scores. maybe they just have to hit those big plays. And maybe then their defense can give them a number of shots. We talked about it yesterday. Their defense will give them shots in this game. Whether it's early or late, I don't know, because that was kind of the issue with the Arizona State game. They gave them plenty of chances early. Texas couldn't capitalize, and then Arizona State came back in because that defense was on the field over and over and over again. So there's a lot of different questions about this. This is not something I'm banking on. When you talk about the Texas offense, it's hard to see them really click right now. But I do think there is a moment. If they fire on all cylinders, I think we could be looking at that Ohio State UGA game back in 2021. We could be looking at a game where two quarterbacks walk out of that thing and it's just who had the ball last, who made that one play. And in that case, it was Stetson Bennett. In this case, it might be Will Howard or Quinn Ewers, and we'll have to figure out tonight. And then the question about Will Howard is, can he shake that 0-4 record against Texas? Because that's the reality of his time in college football. He has been here for quite some time. He's played at Kansas State for the entirety of his time before Ohio State. He has come up short against Texas a number of times during that, and most recently lost in overtime, and Texas kind of kept those CFP hopes alive. Was a ridiculous game over there in Austin. Absolutely was one that leaves a little bit of a sour taste in your mouth if you're Will Howard. So a little bit extra motivation going into this one, no doubt about that, and he would love to make that 1-4 instead of 0-5. But it's going to be awesome to watch this kind of unfold. It's going to be interesting to see what he can do and how much energy he has going into this one. Obviously, him on Kansas State compared to him on Ohio State are two very different things. He has many more toys to play with over at Ohio State, but at the end of the day, most importantly, you just got to make sure that you get over that thing that we've talked about with Ohio State just a little bit. You know, that you see that Longhorn logo, maybe it hurts Will Howard just a little bit. He's got to be able to get past that, move past that, and handle business the rest of the way. But a couple of questions here. I'll be honest, Anthony, I really don't think so. And I fully understand why people are pushing for them to move on from James Franklin, possibly, this year, or at least put him in a bad position going into 2025, what have you. I don't know, man. The way I look at that game last night is, yes, he made mistakes. Yes, he definitely did some things that put his team in some bad spots, but it's hard to deny that they were inches away from a national title. If they win that game, if that kick goes wide and they go to overtime and find a way to win, we're talking about it entirely differently. So overall, that's for Penn State decision to make. If I'm the one making the decision, I say, I don't think you're finding a better head coach this time around than you would have with James Franklin. Can't confirm that, obviously. Maybe there's a guy out there that I'm not thinking of that would be interested in that position, but I don't know. I fully understand the frustration around those big-time games for James Franklin and something that he very much does have to figure out. But the way that I look at it is, you can fire him right now. I can't promise that you're going to have a better head coach next year around, and I can't promise that it's going to get any better than it is right now if you're Penn State. This is another question, and one that a lot of people are going to go back and forth on, but not necessarily because everyone thinks these two head coaches are elite in any respect. I think a lot of people are going after each other just because they don't believe in these two head coaches. I'll just be totally honest with you. Sark is obviously a remarkable play caller, has been caught up at times with different, getting a little too conservative, maybe getting a little too aggressive at times, but overall, he dials up things about as good as anyone in the country, and he's got his work cut out for him against a guy like Jim Knowles. And then Ryan Day and Chip Kelly, they got their work cut out for him as well. This Texas defense does not give you a lot of openings. They play much more zone than Tennessee and Oregon do, so going to make it a little bit harder to get those big explosive plays down the field, but it's going to be a good one. Both head coaches, both OCs, both DCs, all veteran, all smart. I might give the slight advantage to Ohio State just because of that experience factor that they do have with Chip Kelly, with Jim Knowles, with Ryan Day, but overall, both elite coaching staffs and definitely among the top four in the entire country. And Anthony, I talked about that earlier. I probably would have kneeled it and gone to overtime. Maybe it's revisionist history from me. I don't know. Maybe I'm looking at it in the past and saying, obviously, they should have gone to overtime. I probably would have, but I don't necessarily blame him for going for it. I think when you look at what Drew Aller can do with his arm, obviously wasn't quite last night, but you get one big pass there, you get one big run, and then I think things change in a hurry. And Anthony, frankly, they might just have to triple Jeremiah Smith if they want to win this game. I talked about that yesterday. I could see them doing a cornerback 2 safety type double coverage and then putting the number 1 corner on Emeka Egbuka, a couple of different ways to go about business, and that will be a very interesting thing to watch tonight. But the other thing is special teams going to be the decider in this game. And if it is, Texas is not coming out on the right side. I'll be totally honest. Ohio State, Jaden Fielding has played really, really well throughout this year. Had a little bit of a tough moment in the first game against Tennessee, but really played well against Oregon. Absolutely tears balls. They do a really, really good job. On the other side, Bert Auburn obviously missed 2 chances to win that Arizona State game, and there's questions around that kicker position right now. Sark has not committed to a kicker for this game. It sounds like Will Stone was working with the first team early on this week. It sounds like Bert Auburn was working with them late this week, so it's gone back and forth. It'll be very interesting to see who goes out there for the first one, and if it's Bert Auburn, every Texas fan around the country will be holding their breath as he gets ready for that kick. But Ohio State looks stable. Texas looks all over the place. Now, Texas did have that return from Silas Bolden on the punt return, so maybe the kicking won't be the greatest thing in the world, but maybe the return teams can make up for that difference in the special teams category. But as we know, in so many of these games that come down to the wire are very, very close, very talented players. Sometimes it's the special teamers that make things happen. Sometimes it's those guys that really make the difference in these games, and it'll be really interesting to see if they can do that tonight. But let's see what Anthony says here. Yeah, and Anthony, you absolutely did call it. There's no doubt about that. The special teams for Texas has been a downright problem throughout this year, and we'll see if it's a big-time problem tonight. Maybe he'll do a little Mitch Jeter impression and just turn a corner at the right moment for Texas, if I'm being honest. But at the end of the day, will be very interesting to watch and definitely will play a big part in this game. But the other question is this the Pseudo National Championship? And I gotta be honest, I don't necessarily love this question. Just overall, overarching, anytime you use this, I don't necessarily love it. That being said, there is this conversation going on. I saw a million tweets saying, whoever wins the Cotton Bowl, you're the national champion. Congratulations, something we've talked about a couple of times on here, and it absolutely is something that will be the sentiment after this game. Whoever wins it will be dubbed kind of as the national champion going forward. Now, Texas might be a little bit different because them and Notre Dame a little bit closer aligned, but if Ohio State rolls in this game, they're absolutely being crowned the national champion before they've played it. Now, that being said, I do think these are the 2 best teams in the semifinals. I tend to believe that Ohio State and Texas are a little bit better than Notre Dame and Penn State. That being said, I've been wrong 10 ways from Tuesday when you talk about this season. I've been wrong about so many different teams. I've been wrong about the SEC compared to the Big Ten. I've been wrong about a lot of things. So the reality is, if I've learned one thing throughout this year, it's lace them up, put the ball down, let's see what happens. So I'm not going to say it. I do think there are moments where you could say it. I do think there are moments where possibly if Texas wins this one by 3 points and then goes and blows out Notre Dame, then maybe we can have that conversation. But as of right now, Notre Dame has earned their right to be in the national championship. They are playing in the real national championship, so who cares what the pseudo one is. But it is going to be an incredible game over there in Dallas tonight. Cannot wait for that one to get underway, and we'll do a couple of final words at the very end of the show. But let's take our last break here, and when we come back, we got a little bit of a weekend roundup. We got a couple of different things to get to. The biggest one is Carson Beck is in the portal, something that I didn't fully expect to happen, something that Anthony might be very excited about, and we'll talk about here in a second, so stick with us.